Lo acompaña el doctor Ignacio Silva, quien hará la presentación y la inauguración formal de nuestro segundo día de labores. Muchas gracias.
Buenos días, bienvenidos a todos nuevamente.
Oops is not Spanish.
Oops is not Dr. Carroll es el Thomas Aquinas Fellow in Theology and Science del Blackfriars Hall de la Universidad de Oxford y es miembro de la Facultad de Teología de la misma universidad. Es historiador de las ideas y de las ciencias en el Islam, judaísmo y cristianismo medievales y el desarrollo de la doctrina de la creación. Ha escrito tanto en este tema como en las formas en que un análisis de Santo Tomás de Aquino puede favorecer las discusiones contemporáneas acerca de la relación entre teología, filosofía y ciencias. Es coautor de Aquinas on Creation con Stephen Goldner, autor de La creación y las ciencias naturales, actualidad de Santo Tomás de Aquino, publicado en Chile en castellano, y del Thomas Aquinas Creation and Contemporary Science, que está trabajando. Sus ensayos publicados incluyen Thomas Aquinas Creation and the Big Bang Cosmology, Creation, Evolution and Thomas Aquinas and the Metaphysical Foundations of Science, y ha enseñado en varias universidades de Norteamérica, Europa, África del Norte, Sudamérica, y tuve el honor de ser su alumno durante mis estudios de doctorado en Oxford.
All yours. All yours. Gracias. I learned already to say muy buenos dias, not buenos dias, muy buenos dias. I am happy to be here once again at Universidad Panamericana. I was here last year and had a wonderful time. I was here for 10 days, as a matter of fact, last year. I should begin by mentioning that I have still the symptoms of a cold, so that my normal British accent, the veneer of my normal British accent has been erased, and you'll have to be put up with a more gruff North American accent.
Original.
Well, that's right. That's what happens. Yes. There is a handout, and it is really important for everyone to have a copy of the handout because some of the texts are a little more complicated, and you have them on the handout. Furthermore, there are sections in italics which are passages of mine which really help to set the central thesis I am going to argue for. So and you may take this home with you. This is better than a PowerPoint because you can carry it home. I see the lights are very bright, and that means that the speakers cannot see which members of the audience are falling asleep or not, or checking their email or what. So I am blinded from that. I want to begin, however, by expressing thanks to the Templeton Foundation, to the British Council, to the Universidad Panamericana for organizing this conference, and in particular to Andrew Pinsent and Ignacio Silva from Oxford, and to Hector Velázquez from Universidad Panamericana for all the work they have done to make this successful. I also want to thank the translators who do yeoman work. It's a very difficult task. I told them that I speak English reasonably slowly, so that there should not be too much difficulty. And I also want to thank the students of the Universidad Panamericana for all their work in helping to make things move as smoothly as they do. Right. Okay. In August of this year, the Discovery Channel, television channel in the United States, began a series of television programs under the general rubric of curiosity. The first program had the provocative title, Did God Create the Universe? The focus was the thought of the Cambridge cosmologist Stephen Hawking and his claim that, quote, the laws of nature will tell us whether we need God to explain the universe at all. Hawking's fundamental point is that there is no need for a creator, since science offers a more compelling account of the origin of the universe than does any appeal to a creator. Invoking insights from quantum mechanics, Hawking thinks space and energy, the primary components of the universe, were, as he says, spontaneously created out of nothing. Spontaneously created in this context means that there was or is no divine agency involved in the coming into existence of the universe. His arguments include the claim, as we shall see, that talk of the beginning of the universe is meaningless, and that hence to speak of a creator makes no sense. Developments in cosmology and particle physics have long encouraged flights of fancy about what the natural sciences can discover about the origin of the world. It seems easy to draw connections between developments in cosmology concerning the beginning of the universe and theological reflections about creation. We can see this temptation in reactions to the experiments being conducted at the Large Hadron Collider. Physicists have great hopes that this huge particle accelerator, built 300 feet underground on the Swiss-French border, will provide new and fascinating insights into what the universe was like shortly after the Big Bang. One goal is to discover the elusive Higgs boson, a particle reputedly responsible for the conversion of the energy of the Big Bang into the mass of the nascent universe. And this will now be quotation number 1 on your handout. Commenting on the experiments to be performed, Professor Michio Kaku, a physicist at City College of New York, remarked, quote, again, quotation 1, "This is a huge step towards unraveling Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. What happened in the beginning? This is a Genesis machine. It'll help to create the most glorious event in the history of the universe." It has been easy for some in the media to reach the conclusion that experiments conducted using the accelerator will, as one author in Le Monde put it, permit us to make clear the mystery of the creation of the universe. Almost a decade earlier, a science journalist for the New York Times predicted that high-speed particle accelerators would help scientists to work out, quote, a mechanistic gears and levers theory of the Genesis moment itself, the hows, if not the whys, of creation ex nihilo. Despite such enthusiasm, we ought to be alert to what it is that cosmology explains or seeks to explain, and what creation means. What can cosmologists tell us about the mystery of the creation of the universe? An answer to this question requires us to be clear about the explanatory domains of the natural sciences, philosophy, and theology. It requires us as well to be clear as to what kind of beginning cosmology addresses, or, in the case of Stephen Hawking, denies. Hawking once famously remarked that his cosmological model, which denied a beginning to the universe, quote, left nothing for a creator to do. Theories concerning what happened before the Big Bang, as well as those which speak of an endless series of Big Bangs, are often attractive because they too deny a fundamental beginning to the universe and thus appear to make a creator irrelevant. In The Grand Design, published in September 2010, Hawking and his co-author Leonard Mlodinow argue that just as the universe has no edge, so there is no boundary, no beginning to time. Therefore, to ask what happened before the beginning, or even at the beginning, would be meaningless. This is quotation number 2 on your handout from Hawking and Mlodinow. In the early universe, when the universe was small enough to be governed by both general relativity and quantum theory, there were effectively 4 dimensions of space and time. That means that when we speak of the beginning of the universe, we are skirting the subtle issue that as we look backward toward the very early universe, time as we know it does not exist. We must accept that our usual ideas of space and time do not apply to the very early universe. That is beyond our experience, but not beyond our imagination. Now, in that August television show on the Discovery Channel, Hawking expands on this analysis. Nothing caused the Big Bang, he says, because there is no time at any putative beginning. Let me repeat that. Nothing caused the Big Bang because there is no time at any putative beginning. Since time does not exist, there can be no cause of the Big Bang. Hawking thinks that the relationship between cause and effect is essentially temporal. That is, that any cause must exist before an effect of which it is the cause. And his cosmology allows for no time in which a creator could exist prior to the supposed effect. No time, therefore no creator. Such an analysis involves two fundamental assumptions, both of which I would deny, and I deny them because they are false. Not secondo me. First assumption, that the relationship between cause and effect is necessarily temporal, rather than being essentially a relationship simply of dependency with no reference to temporality. Second, that God is, the second assumption, that God is a cause in the same sense that causes in the world are causes, rather than seeing God's causality as radically different from any created causality. Now, these claims involve large philosophical issues, which I hope we can discuss, but I want to point out those underlying assumptions. Ultimately, Hawking and Mlodinow claim, this is quotation 3 on your handout, spontaneous creation is the reason there is something rather than nothing, why the universe exists, why we exist. It is not necessary to invoke God to set the universe going. In fact, the Big Bang of our universe is not unique. Citing a version of contemporary string theory, known as M theory, they tell us that the creation of a great many universes out of nothing does not require the intervention of some supernatural being or God. Rather, these multiple universes arise naturally from physical law. Ultimate questions about the nature of existence, which have intrigued philosophers for millennia, are, so they claim, now the province of science, and philosophy is dead. This is great news for the rector of the Universidad Panamericana, because the expenses of the philosophy department can be eliminated. Philosophy is dead. And then, of course, theology, if mentioned at all, is simply dismissed as irrelevant, another cost savings for the university. Now, this new book, The Grand Design, has fewer than 200 pages, divided into 8 chapters, each with a suggestive title, The Mystery of Being. By the way, that's 8 pages. The Mystery of Being, What is Reality? Choosing Our Universe, The Apparent Miracle, and culminating in The Grand Design. The principal argument they offer is that once we recognize that our universe is but one of an almost infinite number of universes, then we do not need a special explanation, a grand designer, for the very precise initial conditions which account for life and our existence. As they say, and this is quotation number 4 on your handout, just as Darwin explained how the apparently miraculous design of living forms could appear without intervention by a supreme being, the multiverse concept can explain the fine-tuning of physical law without the need for a benevolent creator who made the universe for our benefit. But the grand designer, rejected by Hawking, is not the creator, at least not the creator which traditional philosophy and theology affirms. Hawking's work is part of a larger context of speculations which have intrigued cosmologists. There have been any number of attempts to offer cosmological models which do indeed offer an account of the Big Bang itself. Alexander Vilenkin, for example, developed a variation of an inflationary model of the expanding universe, which accounts for the universe, quote, by quantum tunneling from nothing. Nothing for Vilenkin is a state with no classical space-time, the realm of unrestrained quantum gravity. It is, he says, a rather bizarre state in which all our basic notions of space, time, energy, entropy lose their meaning. Andre Linde, speculating on what happened before the Big Bang, has put forth a theory of eternal inflation, according to which what we know as the Big Bang is only one of many in a chain of Big Bangs by which the universe endlessly reproduces and reinvents itself. According to Linde, our universe began as a bubble that ballooned out of the space-time of a pre-existing universe. He thinks it makes little sense to search for some original bubble, some original beginning of things. And finally, Lee Smolin has spoken of a whole chain of universes which develop according to a theory of cosmological natural selection, so that our universe forms part of an endless chain of self-reproducing universes whose physical laws evolve as they are passed along. The desire in some cosmological circles to get rid of the troubling singularity of the Big Bang itself can be seen in the work of Neil Turok. Using a development of superstring theory, Turok offers a model in which the birth of the present universe is the result of a collision of enormous four-dimensional membranes. Turok's universe, like the one described by Linde, is an endless cycle of universes in collisions with other universes. Turok notes that his model is, as he says, philosophically very appealing. Time is infinite, space is infinite, and they have always been here. It is exactly what the steady-state universe people wanted. Our model realizes their goal. And as Turok points out, many cosmologists in the 1950s and early 1960s were reluctant to accept the Big Bang theory, because if the universe were thought to have such a beginning, then the initial conditions would have to be in some sense accidental, that is, not included within the explanatory framework of the natural sciences. The initial conditions, thus, would have to have a source beyond the explanatory domain of the natural sciences. Such conditions might seem to offer evidence for the existence of God. Now, Turok is critical of the linear inflationary model of the development of the universe and argues that the cyclical model he sets forth fits as well with all the evidence. Turok presented his cosmological speculations in a book written with Paul Steinhardt of Princeton University, the title of which is suggestive, The Endless Universe Beyond the Big Bang. And this is quotation number 5 now on your handout. As we've seen for them, the Big Bang, now in lowercase letters, is not the beginning of space and time, but rather an event that is in principle fully describable using physical laws. Nor does the Big Bang happen only once. Instead, the universe undergoes cycles of evolution. Now, others have embraced traditional Big Bang cosmology, which seems to affirm an absolute beginning of the universe, as providing scientific support for, if not actual confirmation of, the Genesis account of creation. The argument is that an initial singularity, the Big Bang, outside the categories of space and time, points to a supernatural cause of the beginning of the universe. Even Pope Pius XII once remarked that this cosmology offered support for what the opening of Genesis revealed. The relationship between the temporal finitude of the universe and the conclusion that it is created can be found in the work of the Jesuit theologian and cosmologist Robert Spitzer. In his recent book, New Proofs for the Existence of God, Contributions of Contemporary Physics and Philosophy, Spitzer claims that modern physics reinforces the medieval Kalam cosmological argument and shows us that the past time of the universe is finite. Several of you may be familiar with the work of William Lane Craig, who provides arguments similar to the ones offered by Spitzer. Now, in a way, the debate that I've been describing, the people who use cosmology to deny that there's a beginning, and therefore, in many cases, to deny that there's a creator, and the people who use cosmology to think it affirms an absolute beginning, and therefore a creator, this debate is about whether or not cosmology discloses a beginning of the universe. Hawking denies the intelligibility of such a notion, and others argue for variations of an eternal universe. William Wayne Craig and Robert Spitzer claim that cosmology does indeed point to a beginning. The debate, framed in such terms about a beginning, lead the exponents either to reject or to embrace the idea of creation. Despite fundamental differences as to what contemporary cosmology tells us, all these views tend to identify what it means for the universe to be created with its having a temporal beginning. As we shall see, this emphasis on beginnings leads to confusion about creation. News of the experiments to be conducted at the Large Hadron Collider at CERN and the publication of books such as that of Hawking and Mlodinow, and more recently Brian Greene's The Hidden Reality, Parallel Universes and the Deep Laws of the Cosmos, which describes several models of different multiverse scenarios, and Roger Penrose's Cycles of Time, all provide renewed interest in questions about the relationship between cosmology and creation. But unfortunately, much of the discussion concerns old errors concerning what cosmology, philosophy, and theology tell us about the world and its origins. This is true even when more careful commentators remind us that the Large Hadron Collider can offer at best only insights about the very early history of the universe shortly after the Big Bang, and not the Big Bang itself. Now, let me make a brief linguistic point in order to be clear about the terms I am using. The word creation can be used to mean the activity by which God causes things to be, or it can be used to mean the result of God's action. Throughout my comments in this talk, whenever I use the word creation, I mean the activity by which God causes things to be. When I wish to refer to the result of God's creative act, I will use terms such as creatures or created order. For example, when referring to the relationship between cosmology and creation, I mean a comparison between cosmological processes on the one hand and God's creative action on the other. One part of the confusion between creation and the natural sciences has its source in a broad commitment to a kind of totalizing naturalism. This is the view that the universe and the processes within it need no explanation beyond the categories of the natural sciences. The claim is that contemporary science is fully sufficient, at least in principle, to account for all that needs to be accounted for in the universe. Whether we speak of explanations of the Big Bang itself, such as quantum tunneling from nothing, or of some version of a multiverse hypothesis, or of self-organizing principles in biological change, the conclusion which seems inescapable to many is that there is no need to appeal to a creator, that is, to any cause which is outside the natural order. Here is how one cosmologist, Lee Smolin, has put it, and this is quotation 6 on your handout. We humans are the species that makes things. So when we find something that appears to be beautifully and intricately structured, our almost instinctive response is to ask, who made that? The most important lesson to be learned, if we are to prepare ourselves to approach the universe scientifically, is that this is not the right question to ask. It is true that the universe is as beautiful as it is intrinsically structured, but it cannot have been made by anything that exists outside of it. For by definition, the universe is all there is, and there can be nothing outside it. And by definition, neither can there have been anything before the universe that caused it, For if anything existed, it must have been part of the universe. So the first principle of cosmology must be, there is nothing outside the universe. The first principle means that we take the universe to be, by definition, a closed system. It means that the explanation for anything in the universe can involve only other things that also exist in the universe. Thus, whatever kind of creation science can disclose or be used to deny through particle accelerators or elaborate mathematical models, it would be a scientific account of origins employing, as Smolin would say, principles drawn from within the universe. But such a conception of creation is surely not what philosophers and theologians mean when they speak of creation. The distance between minute fractions of a second before the Big Bang and creation is, in a sense, infinite. We do not get closer to creation by getting closer to the Big Bang. Since, as we shall see, creation is not really an event at all, it is not within the explanatory domain of cosmology. It is a subject for metaphysics and theology. Similarly, the nothing in some cosmological models which speak of the Big Bang in terms of quantum tunneling from nothing is not the nothing referred to in the traditional sense of creation out of nothing. The nothing in cosmological reflections may very well be nothing like our present universe, but it is not the absolute nothing central to what it means to create. It is only that about which the theories say nothing. Confusions concerning creation and cosmology, as I have suggested, run the gamut from denials of creation because the universe is conceived as having no beginning, to explanations of a beginning in exclusively scientific terms which avoid any appeal to a creator, to opposing claims that the Big Bang itself offers a kind of scientific warrant for belief in God's creation of the universe. Now, this is going to be quotation 7, which is sort of a central thesis of what I'm saying, and these are my words. Contrary to all these claims, we need to recognize that creation is a metaphysical and theological affirmation that all that is, in whatever way or ways it is, depends upon God as cause. The natural sciences have as their subject the world of changing things, from subatomic particles to acorns to galaxies. Whenever there is a change, there must be something that changes. Whether these changes are biological or cosmological, without beginning or end, or temporally finite, they remain processes. Creation, on the other hand, is the radical causing of the whole existence of whatever exists. Creation is not a change. To cause completely something to exist is not to produce a change in something, is not to work on or with some existing material. When God's creative act is said to be out of nothing, what is meant is that God does not use anything in creating all that is. It does not mean that there is a change from nothing to something. Cosmology and all the other natural sciences offer accounts of change. They do not address the metaphysical and theological questions of creation. They do not speak to why there is something rather than nothing. It is a mistake to use arguments in the natural sciences to deny creation. Reason, as well as faith, can lead to knowledge of the Creator, but the path is in metaphysics, not in the natural sciences. Discussions of creation are different from arguments from order and design to a source of order and design. Similarly, discussions about the fine-tuning of the initial conditions of the universe do not really concern the topic of creation. Thus, whether or not multiverse theories do away with the need to explain fine-tuning, as for example Hawking thinks, They do not provide, multiverse theories do not provide a commentary on creation. Creation, as we have seen, offers an explanation of why things exist at all. It's not an explanation of fine-tuning order or design. Now, to avoid further confusion, we need also to recognize different senses of how we use the term to create. We often speak of human beings creating things, especially with respect to the production of works of art, music, and literature. What it means for God to create is radically different from any kind of human making. When human beings make things, they work with already existing material to produce something new. The human act of creating is not the complete cause of what is produced, but God's creative act is the complete cause of what is produced. This sense of being the complete cause is captured in the expression, out of nothing. To be such a complete cause of all that is requires an infinite power, and no creature, no human being possesses such an infinite power. God wills things to be, and thus they are. Now, to say that God is the complete cause of all that is does not negate the role of other causes which are part of the created natural order. Creatures, both animate and inanimate, are real causes of the wide array of changes that occur in the world. God alone is the universal cause of being as such. Without a proper understanding of the analogical notion of causality among creaturely causes and with respect to God, we cannot begin to grasp what it means for God to be cause. God's causality is so different from the causality of creatures that there is no competition between the two. That is, we do not need to limit, as it were, God's causality to make room for the causality of creatures. God causes creatures to be causes. Already in the 13th century, the groundwork was set for the fundamental understanding of creation and its relationship to the natural sciences. Working within the context of Aristotelian science, and aided by the insight of Muslim and Jewish thinkers, as well as his Christian predecessors, Thomas Aquinas provided an analysis of creation and science which remains true. I think that when it comes to drawing philosophical and theological conclusions from contemporary cosmology, insights from the Middle Ages remain valuable. Astronomers often note that to look out at the heavens is to look back in time. Perhaps to look back in time to medieval discussions of creation and science will help us to look out more clearly and to avoid confusions about both what we are seeing and what the implications of contemporary science are. In fact, I have already been employing an analysis of creation which depends upon the insights of Thomas Aquinas. As Thomas wrote, and this is quotation number 8 on your handout, over and above the mode of becoming by which something comes to be through change or motion, there must be a mode of becoming or origin of things without any mutation or motion through the influx of being. The experience we have of the production of things and of changes in existing things aids us in coming to understand creation, so long as we think analogically of how things are produced. A crucial difference is that the production of things in the world by causes in the world presupposes some existing realities, whereas the production of the complete reality of existing things presupposes no existing reality, but only the creative act itself. As Thomas observes, quotation 9 on your handout, creation is not change except according to a mode of understanding. And I'm not going to read the rest of this for time, but he's making essentially the same point, that creation is not a change except in a kind of way that we try to understand it, but we got to be careful not to think that creation is a change. Creation is not essentially some distant event. Rather, it is the ongoing, complete causing of the existence of all that is. At this very moment, were God not causing all that is to exist, there would be nothing at all. at this very moment. Creation concerns, first of all, the origin of the universe, not its temporal beginning. Indeed, it's important to recognize the distinction between origin and beginning. The former, origin, affirms the complete, continuing dependence of all that is on God as cause. Whatever is created has its origin in God. But we ought not to think that to be created must mean that whatever is created has a temporal beginning. It may very well be that the universe had a temporal beginning, as the traditional interpretation of the opening of Genesis acknowledges. But there is no contradiction in the notion of an eternal created universe. For were the universe to be without a beginning, it still would have an origin. It still would be created. This was precisely the position of Thomas Aquinas, who accepted as a matter of faith that the universe had a temporal beginning, but also defended the intelligibility of a universe created and eternal. Thomas was always clear that the expression ex nihilo, out of nothing, central to the doctrine of creation, ex nihilo does not necessarily mean after nothing. He wrote, this is quotation 10 on your handout, he wrote that the priority of nothing to what comes to exist is not a priority of time or of duration, such that what did not exist before does exist later, but a priority of nature, so that if the created thing is left to itself, it would not exist, because it only has its being from the causality of a higher cause. The theological sense of creation, which includes all that the philosophical understanding affirms, does indeed claim that the world has an absolute beginning, that is, that past time is finite. It is the failure to recognize that to be created does not necessarily entail a temporal beginning, which causes considerable confusion in contemporary debates about the implications of cosmology for arguments about whether or not the universe is created. Thomas also thought that neither science nor philosophy could know whether the universe had a beginning. He did think that metaphysics could show that the universe is created. But Thomas would have warned against those today who use Big Bang cosmology, for example, to conclude that the universe has a beginning and therefore must be created. He was always alert to reject the use of bad arguments in support of what is believed. That's quotation number 11 now. The singularity in traditional Big Bang cosmology may represent the beginning of the universe we observe, but we cannot conclude that it is the absolute beginning, the kind of beginning which would indicate creation. As some contemporary cosmologists recognize, there could very well be something before the Big Bang. Indeed, Gabriele Veneziano, a theoretical physicist at CERN and one of the fathers of string theory in the late 1960s, observes, quote, the pre-Bang universe has become the latest frontier of cosmology. Quotation number 13. Those contemporary cosmological theories which employ a multiverse hypothesis or an infinite series of Big Bangs do not challenge the fundamental feature of what it means to be created, that is the complete dependence upon God as cause of existence. An eternal universe would be no less dependent upon God than a universe which has a beginning of time. To be created out of nothing does not have to mean to begin to be, such that a created universe could not be an eternal universe. Now, when it came to how to read the opening of Genesis, Thomas Aquinas observed that what is essential is the fact of creation, not the manner or mode of the formation of the world. Questions concerning order, design, and chance in nature refer to the manner or mode of formation of the world. Attempts in the natural sciences to explain these facets of nature do not challenge the fact of creation. A world without a temporal beginning concerns the kind of world God has created. It may very well be easier to accept that a world which has an absolute temporal beginning is a created world, and such a world may be especially appropriate for understanding sacred history, important as it is for believers. But an eternal world, one without a beginning of time, would be no less a created world. Cosmological theories are easily used, or rather misused, to support or to deny creation. Each time, however, as I've suggested, to create has been joined inextricably to temporal finitude, such that to be created necessarily means to begin to be. Thus, to deny a beginning is to deny creation. Quotation 15. It was the genius of Thomas Aquinas to distinguish between creation understood philosophically, with no reference to temporality, and creation understood theologically, which included the recognition that the universe does have an absolute temporal beginning. Thomas's analysis of creation and its relationship to what the natural sciences and philosophy tell us is a good example of the importance of science and philosophy for theological reflection, indeed of the appropriate autonomy of these disciplines in any theological view of the world. There is a wider confusion at work here as well, wider than the confusing of creation with beginnings. That is the failure to distinguish between creation and change, and hence the failure to recognize that the natural sciences, including cosmology, have nothing to tell us about the ultimate cause of the existence of things. God's creative power is exercised throughout the entire course of cosmic history in whatever ways that history has unfolded. No explanation of cosmological or biological change, no matter how radically random or contingent such an explanation claims to be, challenges the metaphysical account of creation, that is, of the dependence of the existence of all things upon God as cause. Quantum cosmological scenarios or theories which describe the Big Bang, or which describe the primordial regularities, processes, and transitions connected with the very early stages of the universe, are in principle incapable of being alternatives to creation ex nihilo. They simply do not account for what creation provides, the ultimate ground of existence and order. Reciprocally, creation ex nihilo is not an alternative to the processes and transitions quantum cosmology proposes and provides. These are models of the physical processes which generated our universe and everything emerging in it. Yet we must remember that all such processes and transitions that quantum cosmology talks about, all such processes would not exist to be studied were God not causing them to be as they are. God causes quantum processes to be the quantum processes which they are. Now finally, when some thinkers deny creation on the basis of theories in the natural sciences, or use cosmology to confirm creation, or reject conclusions of science in defense of creation, they misunderstand creation or the natural sciences, or both. The experiments that have begun at CERN's Large Hadron Collider may very well offer new and spectacular insights into the nature of the very early universe, but they will tell us nothing about the creation of the universe. Speculations about our universe as being but one among a vast multiverse system may appeal to the imaginations of mathematical cosmologists like Stephen Hawking, but such speculations do not call into question the fact that whatever is, in whatever way or ways it is caused to be by God. Curiosity, the title of the new television series on the Discovery Channel. Curiosity is a noble human trait, but curiosity, undisciplined by philosophical rigor, leads nowhere. Those who are only curious remain, as Milton says of the fallen angels in Paradise Lost, in wandering mazes lost. Muchas gracias.
Speak in Spanish.
No, I got to put my thing on.
Okay.
Momento.
Can I start?
Sure.
Muchas gracias, doctor Carroll. Estoy seguro que van a haber muchas preguntas. Igual que ayer, les pido que se hagan una pequeña presentación, nombre y su universidad. Hay una, el doctor Pruna, por favor. Atrás suyo. ¿Sí, no? ¿Pruna? Sí.
Sí, bueno, primero,
No. Pruna está por
gracias. Soy Adolfo Orozco de la Universidad Anáhuac del Norte. Comentar primero, pues se ve la necesidad de que haya estos programas de divulgación científica mejores que los de Discovery, porque ahora se dedica también a fantasmas y otras cosas. Realmente en el libro de Hawking empieza diciendo que la filosofía ha muerto y a continuación se dedica a hacer filosofía. Desde luego, a mi juicio, no buena filosofía. Y es curioso cómo si en el siglo XIX ya se había descartado la generación espontánea como algo totalmente imposible de ocurrir, ahora se utilice nuevamente la generación espontánea para tratar de afirmar que el universo viene de la nada. De modo que me parece que ese es un camino equivocado, porque además sabemos por las leyes físicas que un universo, un sistema cerrado no puede salir de su estado si no hay un efecto externo que lo saque del estado en el que se encontraba previamente. De modo que si antes del Big Bang existía el universo, no puede haber salido de ese estado si no hubiera habido algo fuera del mismo universo que lo hubiera sacado del estado en que estuviera antes. Serían mis comentarios. Gracias.
Okay. Thank you. I don't need to hear myself in Castellano also. Although I'm sure it might be better. Thank you for your comments. I think you're correct that when Hawking says philosophy is dead and he proceeds to do philosophy, surely the philosophy which Hawking uses is dead. That's for sure. The arguments advanced, when you talk about that if we were to change from a pre-Big Bang state to a post-Big Bang state, there would have to be some sort of external causation. Quantum cosmology, especially as Hawking understands it, would say no, they think that there is some sort of spontaneous processes within the systems themselves which can account for the kind of change without an appeal to an external agent. Now, whether or not that's true or false is a question for quantum mechanics and then for a natural philosophical reflection on quantum mechanics. But again, I would be careful. I wouldn't want to say that we have an argument for a creator based upon the need to explain a transition from a pre-Big Bang universe to a post-Big Bang universe. Because that question, that type of question, is a question appropriate, it seems to me, for the natural sciences to engage. And whatever kind of change occurs, God is, as creator, cause, because he causes the existence of whatever is, and that means he causes the existence of the changes which occur, but he doesn't cause the existence of the changes the way in which causes in the natural order produce changes. God causes things, causes in the natural order cause things differently from each other. There are different types of causes. God's causality, God causes things, God differs differently. God differs differently from other causes. And so I would be careful, as I said, not to think that we have a way to God through some of these cosmological, a way to God as creator through some of these attempts to explain transitions from one universe to another.
We don't have much time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
A lot of
Okay.
questions.
Okay, fine. Well, I'm around too. I'm eminently engageable in questions, so
That's
I'll be here. So.
Hay muchísimas preguntas y no tenemos mucho tiempo, por lo que le voy a pedir disculpas a los invitados, voy a dar prioridad a la gente de Latinoamérica y empecemos por aquí.
Buenos días, soy el doctor
Perdón,
Alexandre de Pomposo,
y les voy a pedir que sean muy breves.
de la Universidad del Claustro de Sor Juana. Muchas felicidades y gracias por su espléndida exposición, doctor Carroll. Yo solamente tengo una pregunta y es que me gustaría saber qué piensa usted acerca del papel del tiempo a nivel de la longitud de Planck. Concretamente a ese nivel me pregunto, junto con Ilya Prigogine, ¿el tiempo precedería a la existencia?
That is a very difficult question. Aristotle observed, and I'm going to try to be brief, that we need to talk about the same thing in the same respect. And time, like many of these other terms, science itself for that matter, has different senses as it's approached in a kind of common sense way, as it's developed in mathematical physics, and as it's now discussed in cosmology. So Stephen Hawking and Mlodinow and others argue that time as we know it doesn't exist in that pre-Planck era. It has, so to speak, collapsed. That's talking about time in the mathematical physics of contemporary science. And it might very well be true that time as discussed in mathematical physics, in a sense, has come into existence as the universe has developed. But I would want to ask, what is the relationship between time as discussed in mathematical physics, and in particular in quantum mechanics, from time as discussed as a category of explanation in natural philosophy? And that we don't, even though we use the same word, we get into a lot of confusions here. I was trying, I don't really have a solution to that specific question except to point out the differences and simply to say, for me, it does not matter, because the fundamental understanding of creation has nothing to do with temporality. Nothing to do with temporality.
Gracias. Adán, voy a cambiar el orden. Al fondo en la segunda columna. Al fondo, al fondo.
Thank you for your talk. In fact, I think you did a very compelling. You made a very compelling argument to avoid using cosmology, natural science, in order to discuss this issue of creation. But I'm wondering, I think you say or you suggest that the argument to say or to argue for or to propose the creation or an act of an agent who makes this thing is a metaphysical one. And I'm just wondering, perhaps you don't have time to develop this one, but I just want to know, if I can't use cosmology, what is that argument?
I didn't hear if you can't use cosmology, what?
What is the argument, the metaphysical argument to propose that we need to postulate a creator?
Well, 2 points. Well, 2 points. I was careful to say the argument for creation is metaphysical. I think there are arguments for the existence of God in natural philosophy, but they're not yet fully arguments for God as creator. They're for God as unmoved mover, etc., for God as source of intelligibility. But that's not yet an explanation of God as cause of existence. The argument in metaphysics would presuppose a distinction between what things are, their essences, and that they are their existences, and that distinction between essence and existence in things leads ultimately to a source of the existence of things, since the cause of the existence of things is not in things, and therefore there must be some cause of that, and ultimately that cause must be uncaused, and so forth. So there are a lot of metaphysical presuppositions, of course, but that's true of any metaphysics. First of all, that the existence of things needs a cause. I was having lunch with some philosophy students on Tuesday, and I said, look, the counter-argument to my position is Existence is a brute fact. It doesn't need an explanation. It just is. And then I would have to engage dialectically to argue to first principles in metaphysics, involving the distinction between essence and existence, and the need for existence to have a cause. And that is, for Thomas, that's much more complicated, that is, for Thomas, the basis of what he thinks is the metaphysical argument. And if you look at quotation number 14, the most radical sentence of the 13th century in Latin philosophy, not only does faith hold that there is creation, but reason also demonstrates it. And the demonstration is in metaphysics.
Daniel, I think, had a question. Daniel, por favor, breve.
Daniel van Wachter, Academia Internacional de Filosofía. You drew our attention to the possibility that the universe has no beginning and that, yes, that's English, and that God sustains the universe, and said that, yes, then it's true to say still that God created the universe. Yes, I agree that we can say that, but not many people hold that that is not so. The only argument against it are the a priori arguments for the universe having a beginning, and these you did not address. So I don't think you've defended your claim very much. And the alternative view would be that the universe did have a beginning, that beginning was caused by God, and then it would be natural to call that first causing, that first bringing something into being, call that creation, and the sustaining activity just sustaining. But I don't think you have given us much reason to assume one or the other view that the universe has a beginning or that it has none, and I don't think you've given us much reason to defend really the possibility of the universe having no beginning.
Oh, good. First of all, the question, I would agree with Thomas Aquinas that whether or not the universe has a beginning is not something which reason can conclude. It is, if the universe has a beginning, it is something, a kind of beginning which would be creation. It could be only known through faith, through revelation, and Thomas thinks that's what happens. So the fundamental point here is that Thomas distinguishes, and I distinguish here, between creation understood philosophically and creation understood theologically. The theological understanding of creation includes all that the philosophical understanding has and adds not only the question of temporal beginning, but also in Christ, etc., etc. My point is that if we're going to engage what contemporary cosmologists argue are the implications for that cosmology, either for or against creation, we have to proceed philosophically, and by proceeding philosophically, we abstract from the question of temporality. And when we abstract from the question of temporality, we argue in metaphysics for God as the complete cause of all that is. And that is the fundamental sense of creation. Thomas Aquinas, and I again agree with him, does not distinguish between some initial act of creation and some separate act called conservation. He doesn't think that makes any sense. Creation is, as I said, right now. Were God not causing things right now, there would be nothing. So I didn't defend the notion that we can't talk about a beginning. Only my fundamental point was the discussion about whether cosmology reveals a beginning or doesn't disclose a beginning is really irrelevant to the question of whether or not the universe is created, because whether or not the universe is created is first of all a philosophical question, and then also a theological question. But it's a philosophical question, which means we can engage in reason without any appeal to a theological tradition to discuss creation.